Hello and welcome. My name is Andrew Jong, and today I am presenting our team's approach to the Video Virtual Try-On Challenge. This is a challenge for the CVPR 2020 workshop towards human-centric image and video synthesis, and I'm excited to present our results to you today. So let's start with the challenge description. The dataset for this competition was the VVT dataset, which stands for Virtual Video Try-On. There are 791 total videos in this dataset, split into training and testing sets. Each video is roughly 8 seconds, resulting in 240 frames per video. As you can see on the right-hand side, each training sample has one isolated cloth product image, as well as a video of the person walking around and corresponding COCO 18 key points. The goal of the challenge is to be able to infer on arbitrary inputs. The desired output should maintain the attributes of the cloth and person images while following the sequence of the skeleton poses. The result should also be temporally coherent and realistic. Now let's discuss our approach to this problem. We hypothesized that the video virtual try-on task can be broken down into two subtasks. The first subtask is the person reposing subtask, where given the input image of the person and the skeleton pose sequence, we can generate the video of the person walking around. The second subtask is the try-on subtask, where you have cloth product image, the user image, and you try on the cloth to the user. We hypothesized that splitting the full task into these subtasks could produce acceptable results. This is the overview of our entire pipeline. First, we do the reposing subtask using the global flow local attention module to repose the person to all the video frames. Then we feed that into the try-on subtask, where we use the CP-VTON repository to perform the try-on. Now let's talk about the first subtask, reposing. To reiterate, the input is a single person image and the skeleton pose sequence, and we aim to generate all the video frames for that person walking around. Our first attempt to do the reposing subtask was with the guided Pix-to-Pix repository. This is proposed by Al-Bahar et al. 2019, published in the ICCV conference. It takes an input image and a pose guide to generate the output image of the person according to that pose, which is exactly what we wanted. Now, when we use the pre-trained checkpoint on the VVT test set, the inference results were not the best. As you can see, their temporal coherence is quite bad, and there are lots of flickering artifacts. But this is somewhat expected, as Guide Pix-to-Pix repository is entirely image-based and is not meant to be temporally coherent. Therefore, we switched to using a different repository called Global Flow Local Attention. This is proposed by Ren et al. And it will be published in this year's CVPR conference. And their claim is that they can do person reanimation with strong temporal coherence, as you can see on the example on the right, taken from their purported results on their GitHub page. As you can see, the results are quite clean. Unfortunately, when we tried this repository on the VVT test set, it did not produce very clean results. As you can see, the result is not following the pose guidance very well, nor is the person even a person. So why did this happen? Well, we observed that some of the key points in the VVT dataset are sometimes noisy, especially for the zoomed in samples. Furthermore, the original global flow checkpoint was not trained on these zoomed in samples, so we can't expect it to generalize to these views. Therefore, we decided to retrain the global flow repository on the VVT competition dataset. So what were the results of this custom checkpoint? Here's the model trained to 17,000 steps, and the inference results are on the trained data. As we can see, the results look pretty decent. You can see the same at 30,000 steps. Now there is some black coloring on the side. This is because during training there is some rotations for data augmentation. However, when we do inference on the test data, the results break down. You can see that it's not transferring the correct cloth shape, the sleeves are the wrong length, nor is it preserving the color of the clothing. There are also severe ghosting artifacts on the side. At 30,000 steps, the model is roughly the same. On the test data set, we still have severe artifacts, although in this upper example, at least it's transferring the correct color for the clothing. So some summary observations about the global flow local attention model is that it achieved good quality on training, but quite poor quality on the test set. As we mentioned, there are ghost artifacts, the low and high frequency details for the textures were missing, and the user identity was not well preserved. However, the global flow repository did achieve slightly better results in terms of temporal consistency than the guided pix-to-pix results that you can see here. The flickering is less severe. But at this point, unfortunately, we ran out of time to refine the reposing subtask further. So for the reposing subtask, we settled on using the custom-trained global flow model up to 30,000 steps. All right, now let's continue to talk about how we approach subtask 2, the try-on. Again, the input here is the cloth product image and the person image, and we want to have the cloth product tried on to the person. The best repository we were able to find for image try-on is the CPVTON repository by Wang et al. 2018, published in ECCV. CPVTON consists of two modules. First is the geometric matching module, which takes as input the cloth product image and warps it to the user's body shape. Next is the try-on module, which takes that warped cloth and composes it with the image of the person using an alpha mask, and this way it achieves try-on. Our approach was to simply train the CPVTON model with more examples. So originally it was trained on the Viton dataset. We combined this with the VVT dataset provided in this competition, as well as the MPV dataset provided in track 3 of the same workshop. MPV stands for multi-pose virtual try-on. So for the geometric matching module, we trained up to around 33,000 steps, and for the try-on module, we trained to around 3,800 steps. Now to recap for our pipeline, in order to perform the full try-on, we first had to do a global flow to repose it, and then we're going to do CPVTON. But in order to do this, we had to first parse the lip clothing segmentation labels on every single frame of the global flow output. So this is how those results look. At first, we were afraid that the lip parser would not be able to parse anything at all because the global flow results were so noisy. However, it was surprisingly robust to these noisy inputs, as you can still see the shape of the user and the face, which is important for CPVTON. Okay, now we can take a look at our final results. So here we have the user image on the left and the cloth product in the middle, the try-on result on the right. Now admittedly, these aren't the best try-on results. Clearly, there's a lot of room for improvement. We were most limited by the global flow reposing output because it was so flickery. But as you can see, the try-on module was still able to put the clothing in the correct position on the user and even maintain some of the high-frequency texture details. Here are some more examples. This one has some strange warping here, especially with the inside of the shirt. Now, I'd like to point out that these examples are not cherry-picked. They are simply the first 10 samples when sorted alphabetically. And from what I've been able to see, is pretty representative of the overall results. So to summarize, our results have both strengths and weaknesses. It seems that CPVTON was the strongest contributor to the strengths. It was able to preserve some of the texture details, as well as place the cloth at approximately the correct location on the user following the pose sequence. It also seems that the try-on module was able to reduce some of the flickering introduced by the global flow repository. Of course, there are many weaknesses and room for improvement, namely that our custom-trained global flow model provided extremely poor results, in that there were ghost artifacts, the face was not preserved, and it did especially poorly on zoomed-in views. Another weakness is the geometric matching module in CPVTON, which has no concept of a person's orientation, really. Another weakness we observed is the geometric matching module in CPVTON, which doesn't really have a concept of a person's orientation. You might have seen in the results that even when the person was facing away from the camera, some of the textures on the front of the shirt were still facing towards the camera. This is something that's possibly addressed by the MGVTON paper in Jong et al. 2019, but we haven't found public code for that, so have not been able to verify it ourselves. We also hypothesize that the noisy pose points within the data may have contributed somewhat to the poor quality. Now, we'd also like to recommend some future work for the community. Especially, we think that a common problem could be overfitting. We see that many of the results in virtual try-on papers, there's no way to tell if they've been cherry-picked or not. We think that authors need to publish more representative results, such as the weakest results, the average results, and the best results. This leads into the need for a quantitative quality metric to assess how good the virtual try-on is. Now, we realize that this is a challenging task and don't claim to have the answer, but we do highly encourage the community to work towards it. Perhaps we can investigate some perceptual metrics. The final problem is that we've seen many papers in virtual try-on, but little code online about how to reproduce them, meaning that with the complexity of all the hyperparameters in neural networks these days, the experiments are almost unreproducible. Right now, the best public repository in virtual try-on is CPVTON, which is already 2 years old. So, if you're working in this virtual try-on space, please add your code to GitHub and add it to the public Papers with Code website under the virtual try-on task, so that we can all improve together as a community. Of course, for this challenge, we also make our code public, which you can find at these links below. One more thing that we'd like to advertise to the virtual try-on community is the Fashion repository on GitHub. This is maintained by the Multimedia Lab at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. And essentially, it's an open source visual fashion analysis toolbox based on PyTorch. So there are a lot of common tasks in this virtual try-on space, such as doing parsing, segmentation, and the Multimedia Lab is aiming to coalesce all of these tasks into a single central repository, including for virtual try-on. So if you would like to add your work to this toolbox as well, we think that that would greatly benefit the virtual try-on community as a whole. And with that, I'd like to sincerely thank all the organizers for this virtual try-on challenge and workshop. Even though the results weren't the best, we hope to continue improving and contributing to this community in the future. And thank you all very much for listening to our presentation today.